In the autumn of 2024, as the sweet fragrance of osmanthus wafted through the air, another ordinary morning began in a stately white colonial mansion in the Newton district of suburban Boston. The house, situated in the quiet residential area of Chestnut Hill, was one of the most beautiful in the neighborhood, with its well-maintained front garden blooming with colorful New England asters. "Hannah, it's time to go." Victoria Anderson looked up from her desk in her home office and called up to the second floor. On her antique-style desk sat the latest MacBook, while the walls were adorned with frames displaying advertisements she had designed. She maintained a successful career as a freelance graphic designer while perfectly fulfilling her role as a housewife. On weekends, she would stock up on carefully selected ingredients from Whole Foods Market, and on Sundays, after church, she would bake her famous quiche that was the talk of the neighborhood. She actively participated in community charity work and served on the board of the Brookline Country Club. To everyone else, she appeared to be living an enviably ideal life. Her 12-year-old daughter Hannah came rushing down the stairs, dressed in Bradford Academy's navy blazer, her blonde hair neatly arranged. "Good morning, Mom. I have a special science project presentation today. I'm so excited." Victoria turned at her daughter's voice and smiled, seeing the spark of curiosity shining in her eyes. Although only in 7th grade, Hannah was already showing promise in science and mathematics. Her sincere and honest nature had earned her the trust of her teachers. Just recently at the parent-teacher conference, Mr. Murphy, her homeroom teacher, had given her his seal of approval, saying, "She's a student with an incredibly promising future." "Robert, what about breakfast?" Victoria called out to her husband as he emerged from his study. The aroma of freshly baked croissants from Tat Bakery wafted through the spacious kitchen. Robert was one of Boston's most successful divorce attorneys. As a senior partner at a prestigious law firm in Beacon Hill, he was known for his impeccable appearance and courteous demeanor. Earning over $8 million annually, he was highly regarded in the legal community. However, something about him had been different lately. "No, I'm heading out early. Breakfast meeting with a client," Robert answered while hurriedly making his way to the front door. His suit seemed slightly more wrinkled than usual. His hand appeared to tremble slightly as he pressed the remote start for his luxury Lexus. For the past month, Victoria had been quietly observing changes in her husband's behavior. He had been leaving earlier for work more frequently, became unusually strict about managing his mobile phone, and increased his overtime hours and business trips. What particularly concerned her was that Wednesday, client meetings, had become a regular fixture in his schedule. He had also become uncharacteristically meticulous about managing household finances. The doorbell rang, and one morning in early September, not long after the new term had begun, Hannah brought home a letter from school. "Hey Mom, look! We're doing a family genetics project." Her voice brimmed with genuine excitement. The envelope contained instructions for submitting hair samples, which were to be distributed to each family. During dinner that evening, Robert was unusually nervous as he reviewed the instructions. He repeatedly checked the documents without touching his crab bisque soup. Under the chandelier in the luxurious dining room, Victoria didn't miss the change in her husband's expression. Her observational skills, honed through years of experience as a graphic designer, didn't overlook even the slightest change. However, she had no way of knowing yet that this sense of unease would mark the beginning of events that would dramatically alter her life. Outside the window, maple leaves gleamed in the autumn sunlight. The laughter of neighborhood children could be heard from the front yard, along with the barking of someone walking their dog. In this wealthy suburban mansion, the Anderson family's peaceful daily life was quietly but surely beginning to crumble. Around 9 o'clock at the front door, Hannah cheerfully called out, "I'm off," as she left for school. As Victoria watched her daughter's departing figure, she felt an uneasy premonition that she was missing something important. It felt like something was stirring beneath the surface of this perfect life, like the calm before a storm. Victoria's premonition proved accurate. That afternoon, an email from Bradford Academy began to turn her suspicions into reality. The email, which began with "Dear Parents," detailed the family genetics project. The submission deadline was September 30th, results would be reported on October 14th. The analysis would cover 30 different genetic traits. Hair samples were required from both parents and children. The project was described as a groundbreaking initiative to teach students the basics of genetics as part of their science education. After reading the email, Victoria reflected on her husband's recent strange behavior. What particularly concerned her was Robert's demeanor since the project announcement arrived. "I'll handle submitting the samples." At dinner, Robert unusually volunteered. Why was he being so proactive about this when he normally showed no interest in school-related paperwork? Victoria quietly observed her husband. His hand trembled slightly as he held his wine glass. "But Papa, don't you have a Chicago business trip on September 30th? Hannah's innocent question made Robert freeze for a moment. "Ah, that's right. I'll be back on the first morning flight and submit it myself." There was a hint of panic in his response. That night, Victoria sat in her bedroom staring at an email. The sender was Tracy Private Investigation. The first report from the investigation she had commissioned in mid-August had arrived. The attached photographs showed Robert. The location was Providence. The truth about his Wednesday client meetings was gradually coming to light. Victoria's investigation entered a new phase. Detailed review of bank records. History of suspicious transfers. And the installation of security cameras. Everything was aimed at uncovering the truth before this genetics project began. "Mom, this project is amazing." Hannah excitedly began explaining when she returned from school. "They're going to examine DNA and see how things like eye color and height are passed down from parents to children." As Victoria watched her daughter's innocent smile, she steeled herself for what was to come. The high-performance camera she had installed in the garage had already captured certain footage. Early morning on September 30th, Robert's suspicious movements as he replaced something. And then came the fateful day of October 14th. At dusk, Hannah returned from school in an excited state. In her hands was the genetics project results report. In that moment, Victoria intuitively knew her life was about to change dramatically. "Papa, look." But something strange. Hannah's voice echoed through the quiet living room. Robert, who had been preparing dinner, turned at her voice. "What do you mean?" "My jeans don't match with yours, Papa." "Isn't that weird?" At that moment, the air in the living room froze. The color drained from Robert's face. And his anger was immediately directed at Victoria. "Did you do something? Don't you have some explaining to do?" Robert's voice trembled with barely contained rage. However, Victoria's expression remained perfectly calm. She slowly reached for the kitchen counter drawer and pulled out a folder. "Actually, Robert, you're the one who needs to explain. Look at this." The sound of the folder opening cut sharply through the silent living room. Inside, evidence revealing a 16-year secret was meticulously organized. Victoria's mind went back to mid-August, 2 months ago. The days of her quiet investigation that began then came flooding back like a movie flashback. One Wednesday afternoon at the peak of summer heat, Victoria had received a phone call that confirmed her suspicions about the unnaturalness of her husband's client meetings. When she tried to urgently contact Robert's office, his secretary Janet had casually let slip, "Wednesday's schedule? I'm sorry, but Mr. Anderson is always out on Wednesday afternoons." Those words had created the first crack in the wall of trust built over 16 years. The next day, Victoria had knocked on the door of Tracy Private Investigation. Maria Tracy, the female detective who received her, was known as a specialist in divorce cases. Ironically, Robert himself had once praised her abilities. "I understand your request," Maria continued in a calm voice while taking notes. "We'll begin with basic surveillance, focusing on the Wednesday behavior patterns." In late August, the first report arrived. The photos captured Robert heading to the East Side district of Providence. A quiet residential area. A historic red brick house. And the back view of an unfamiliar woman greeting him. As September began, Victoria's investigation expanded to bank records. The existence of an account that Robert managed in complete secrecy, separate from their joint accounts, came to light. Regular transfers had been made from this account for 16 years. The destination was the SM Education Trust Fund. In addition to monthly living expenses, annual tuition payments of $50,000 were being made. The name, Sarah Mitchell, emerged in mid-September. 42 years old. A woman who had originally worked as a legal assistant at Robert's firm. And she had a 15-year-old son, Jeremy Mitchell. His date of birth coincided exactly with the period when Robert had stayed in Providence for 2 weeks on a business trip. Victoria had secretly upgraded her home security system as well. She installed the latest AI-equipped security cameras at the entrance, Hannah's study room, hallway, and garage. All footage was set up to be transmitted to her smartphone in real time. The camera image quality is phenomenal. The technician who installed them gave his seal of approval. You can clearly see facial expressions even at night. And the decisive footage was captured at 6 a.m. on September 30th. Robert was supposed to be on a business trip to Chicago. However, the security camera clearly recorded him sneaking into Hannah's study room. His unnatural movements as he took out the hair samples that should have been in the designated envelope and replaced them with something else. The envelope was addressed to Bradford Academy Genetics Project Office. Victoria's investigation continued into an even darker abyss. Family photos in Providence. The son's birth certificate. The contract for the second home. 16 years of transfer records. School tuition payment records. The existence of hidden accounts. And most decisively, the security camera footage of the hair sample switch and photos of a boy who looked exactly like Robert. The evidence of attempted DNA test tampering was perfectly assembled. Throughout this process, Victoria had dealt with various emotions. Anger, sadness, the pain of betrayal. However, stronger than all of these was her maternal determination to protect Hannah, who had the right to know the truth. Tampering with DNA test results would constitute a crime, Maria pointed out with a stern expression. Especially falsifying documents submitted to educational institutions is a serious offense. Victoria nodded silently. She had already anticipated the developments that would follow once this truth came to light. The anonymous email consultation with a Harvard law professor had received a clear response. In this case, with proof of misconduct, the compensation claim could significantly exceed the usual 40% of assets. The preparations to confront the truth were perfect. All that remained was to wait for the moment. Victoria took one final look at the evidence compiled in the folder. It contained a detailed record of 16 years of double life. "Mom, these results are strange, right?" Hannah's innocent voice brought Victoria back to reality. She met her daughter's pure gaze and quietly opened the folder. A silence fell over the Anderson mansion. Outside, the setting sun dyed the autumn trees red, and maple leaves danced in the breeze, slowly settling in the front yard as if watching over this family's upheaval. Despite the beautiful autumn scenery, an unbearable tension filled the room. Robert's eyes were bloodshot, like those of a cornered animal. His perfect lawyer's mask was falling away in an instant. Victoria opened the folder with steady hands. Inside, 16 years of truth was carefully organized in chronological order. First came the basic evidence. Family photos taken in Providence's quiet residential area. Images of Sarah Mitchell and 15-year-old Jeremy. The boy's eye shape, nose bridge, and even his distinctive ear shape, all strikingly similar to Robert's. The real estate contract for the red brick house in East Side. And the decisive evidence, the son's birth certificate. Born July 15, 2009. Victoria quietly read the date. "The time you were staying in Providence for 2 weeks." Robert's face turned pale. He tried to find words to refute but couldn't in the face of the mounting evidence. The economic evidence page showed 16 years of transfer records neatly arranged. $5,000 monthly for living expenses. $50,000 annually for the son's private school tuition. Special transfers for Christmas and birthdays. All payments went to the SM Education Trust Fund. The total amount had well exceeded $1 million. A hidden account at Rhode Island State Bank. The pin is your son's birthday. Robert was left speechless at Victoria's calm voice. But this was just the beginning. Turning to the next page revealed high-resolution stills extracted from the security camera footage of September 30th early morning. At 6 a.m., when he was supposed to be on a business trip to Chicago, Robert sneaking into Hannah's study room. Carefully removing the original hair sample and replacing it with another. It was clear that this other was Jeremy's hair. You attempted to tamper with the DNA test. This is a crime, Robert. At these words, Robert's knees gave way. He collapsed onto the expensive leather sofa. Why did you investigate so thoroughly? His voice had completely lost its former dignity. Victoria opened the next page. There were consultation records from a renowned Massachusetts family law specialist. Attempting to tamper with DNA test results, especially fraud against an educational institution, constitutes a serious crime. Moreover, the discovery of a 16-year double life is an extremely important factor in calculating compensation. As a legal expert, Robert understood this meaning all too painfully. All color had drained from his face. If I submit this to the police, you'll lose your law license. Victoria's voice was ice cold. At that moment, Hannah spoke up in an anxious voice. Mom, Dad, what does this mean? Victoria turned to her daughter and smiled gently. Hannah, we need to talk. You have a right to know. However, the opportunity for that explanation came in an unexpected form. The doorbell rang, and there stood an unexpected visitor. A 15-year-old boy. Jeremy Mitchell, with features strikingly similar to Robert's. Dad, there's no need to hide anymore. The boy's voice was surprisingly calm. And behind him stood Sarah Mitchell. The living room was again enveloped in deep silence. The chandelier light illuminated each of their expressions. Robert's destroyed dignity, Victoria's resolute attitude, Hannah's confused expression, and Jeremy's determined gaze. At this moment, the Anderson family's peaceful daily life completely collapsed. However, it was also the beginning of a new life based on truth. Outside, dusk was deepening. Maple leaves danced in the wind, slowly accumulating in the front yard as if watching over this family's upheaval. Robert's plan had completely failed. His despicable strategy of trying to cover up his affair by casting suspicion on his wife. His attempt to tamper with evidence using his son's hair. All of it had been revealed through Victoria's calm investigation. And now, with nowhere to run, he had no choice but to accept the truth. Dad, was our relationship a lie? Hannah's trembling voice cut through the living room's heavy atmosphere. At that question, Robert was finally crushed. Large tears fell from his eyes. As a divorce attorney who had witnessed the collapse of numerous families, he now had to face the consequences as the very person who had destroyed his own family. Outside, streetlights were beginning to illuminate one by one. A new chapter was about to begin for the Anderson family. In the autumn of 2025, the old mansion in Chestnut Hill had new residents. After selling the property, Victoria and Hannah had settled in a quiet residential area of Brookline. The view from their windows was different from their previous home. However, mother and daughter's expressions showed a peace that hadn't been there before. "Mom, look." Hannah, now 13, held out a notice from school. It announced her victory in the Bradford Academy Science Olympiad preliminaries. Ironically, last year's genetics project had only deepened her interest in science. Victoria watched her daughter's growth with quiet pride. Twice-weekly counseling sessions had brought significant changes to both mother and daughter. Their conversations with Dr. Samantha Green had become an important support in helping them accept past pain and build a new life. Everyone has the right to know their identity. Samantha's words had particularly resonated with Hannah. She could now honestly face her roots. Victoria's work had also taken a new turn. Her reputation as a freelance graphic designer had steadily grown, and she had received exclusive contract offers from several major companies. However, she had chosen to maintain flexible working arrangements to prioritize time with Hannah. Their new living room was filled with a warm atmosphere created by furniture mother and daughter had chosen together. Hannah's science project awards were proudly displayed on the wall, alongside photographs of their trips to the Maine coast. These were testaments to their new life. Meanwhile, Robert's downfall had been swift. The attempted DNA test tampering sent shockwaves through the legal community, and the prestigious law firm immediately severed ties with him. The Massachusetts Bar Association had begun an investigation, and the revocation of his law license was only a matter of time. The court-ordered settlement amounted to 60% of his assets, far exceeding the usual compensation for infidelity cases. Ironically, he had also been rejected by his Providence family. Sarah Mitchell had cut ties decisively after Robert's double life came to light. And his son Jeremy had also begun refusing contact with his father. "Dad's lies ruined my life too." Jeremy said this during a counseling session. He had now started a new life in Rhode Island with his mother, Sarah. Robert now lived alone in a small apartment in suburban Boston. His once glamorous social life had faded away, and he no longer showed his face at the weekend country club. His phone received no calls from anyone. However, the events of this year had unexpectedly created new connections. Hannah and Jeremy had begun meeting online once a month. Though awkward at first, the half-siblings gradually warmed to each other. Sharing a particular interest in science, they enthusiastically discussed their school experiences and future dreams. "The programming stuff Jeremy taught me is so interesting." Hannah eagerly reported her conversations with her brother to her mother. Her eyes sparkled with the joy of new discoveries. Victoria quietly watched over the children's interactions. She had also begun keeping in touch with Sarah. The two women understood that they were both victims of deception and gradually opened their hearts to each other. "We have to look forward, for our children's sake." Victoria said this during a phone call with Sarah. The two mothers promised to cooperate for their children's future. In the garden of their new home, the rose bushes Hannah had planted in spring were blooming for the first time. The pure white petals seemed to symbolize their new beginning. On weekends, Victoria and Hannah enjoyed shopping at the local farmers market. While selecting fresh vegetables, mother and daughter chatted about daily events. Sometimes difficult topics came up, but they now had the strength to accept any truth. "Mom, I've decided I want to become a genetic researcher in the future." Hannah announced this suddenly one day. She wanted to use her experience to help others. Victoria quietly nodded as she looked at her daughter's determined expression. Their past pain had made them stronger and shown them a new path. Truth sometimes reveals itself in cruel ways. However, if you have the courage to accept and overcome it, new hope will always emerge. Victoria and Hannah's story quietly spoke to this universal truth. The autumn breeze of 2025 gently stirred the windows of their new home. There, a new daily life unfolded for mother and daughter, who had accepted the weight of the past while finding hope for the future.